So what are they up against in the federal bureaucracy? How many people, how many departments, how many heads? How many heads are on the chopping block in theory? Well, let's take a look. As you can see, we got a lot of people in a lot of departments. The Department of Health and Human Services, which is the biggest share of spending, $880 billion of our federal budget is in health and human services. That's Medicare, Medicaid, and the various other health-related services. 88,000 employees, created in 1953. The Department of Defense obviously has the biggest head count because it includes all of the military. But there you go. There's a lot of heads to cut there. And actually, as we've heard from President Trump, he doesn't want to cut heads. He wants to rebuild the military. And I put that in scare quotes because I don't really know whether it needs to be rebuilt or not. We're certainly spending a lot of money on our military. And yet we hear this desire to rebuild it, like we're constantly rebuilding it. The Department of Labor, 14,000 people. The Department of Agriculture, 84,000 people, $134 billion. Department of Veterans Affairs, of the Interior, 56,000 people. Department of Transportation, 53,000 people. Any one of these would be a massive, major corporation. The budgets here are astounding. These would be Fortune 100 companies each. And having worked in a big corporation, Viacom, I can tell you that there's always a lot of places to tighten the belt in a big organization. Some of that is just straight up waste. Some of it is necessary slack to try to figure out how to adapt to a changing world. The problem with our federal government, and this is, I think, the greatest hope for the DOGE, frankly, and even for the kind of odd nature of what this is to have essentially Elon Musk be advising from the outside while also being a military contractor, which is weird and kind of corrupt. But nonetheless, they're basically acting like outside consultants. That's the best model for what this seems like the best version of this could be. They're coming in and asking, in theory, the questions that you would expect. What do you do and why? And if they do a pretty good job of that, there could be some useful things to come from it. We have a lot of rules and regs and a lot of people whose job it is to mess with us and tell us what to do and how to do it across every single dimension. Let me give you a personal example, just one. There's a department called the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and its job, ostensibly, is to make sure that consumer products are safe. In the mid-2000s, a series of toys with lead paint on them caused a big scare. And so the Consumer Product Safety Commission decided we're going to tighten our grip on how painted products for kids get produced. This turned out to be a catastrophe for the natural products industries, the people producing wooden blocks or clothing, stuff that doesn't have lead paint, or that where the lead paint, even if there is some lead paint, is on the interior of a thing and is irrelevant. Was there spending involved in forcing entire industries to change the way they produce their products? No, not by the federal government. But they were inducing massive costs on we the people. And in many cases, those costs hit small businesses the hardest. So Mattel, who of course lobbied for these changes, also got a special exemption and an ability to test their own products in their own self-made facilities. Why do I even know about this? I know about this because my wife and I were trying to start a business producing cloth diapers, which is a super crunchy granola thing that sounds like, weirdo lefty nonsense, but they're actually quite great. And it turns out that we were subject to these rules and regs, and they were onerous, and it almost made doing it impossible. Nobody's eating cloth diapers, number one, and there's no opportunity to apply lead paint to cloth diapers. And yet Mattel, billion-dollar corporation, could absorb the costs and have the legal team, while we, small business trying to help, basically crunchy homeschool moms do things a little different, we get screwed. And there are massive costs they induce on our society that firing them will eliminate. I am for that. I hope they do it. I hope they do a good job. And we would all be better off. Talk to anybody in agriculture. They'll give you stories that are far more dramatic about the Bureau of Land Management or the USDA or the FDA. These agencies make everything we do more expensive. Everything. So that's the good part. Another good part, my favorite part, is that there's things that aren't so much about dollars and cents, but they're about even more important aspects of our lives, like the way we get to educate our kids and how our schools work. And so one of the biggest opportunities is for Donald Trump and the DOGE and the entire movement that is now taking over DC to slash and burn that stuff to the ground.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children because they'll do a much better job of it. Yep. You can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom. We're one of the worst. So you can't do worse. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. We're going to close it up, all those buildings all over the place, and you have people that in many cases hate our children. We're going to send it all back to the states.
Do they hate our children? I'm not sure they hate our children. Do they have ideas that I find abhorrent and that I despise? Yes. Yes, they do. You might disagree. That's okay. But that's why we shouldn't have one size fits all. That's why we shouldn't have Donald Trump or the next president of the United States be in charge of how our schools are run. I should be able to put my kids in the school of my choice, and you should be able to put your kids in the school of your choice. The Department of Education is an example of where slashing these institutions couldn't be more important, regardless of the cost. And they do spend a bunch of money. It's something like $80 billion a year. So I think those are good opportunities. Those are things we should be cheering for. They will face enormous obstacles. And that's one of the other reasons why I think this is a challenging and interesting problem of our politics that the founders, with the separation of powers, didn't anticipate. To go back to Civics 101, the fundamental concept of the structure of our federal government, to have an executive branch, a judicial branch, and a legislative branch, be separated, and even the legislature to be separated into the Senate and the Congress, was to pit power-seeking politicians and want-to-be tyrants against each other, in the theory that that would be something like market competition. It would look something like, not perfectly, Walmart and Amazon trying to kill each other for our benefit. The problem is that over time, the Congress has decided that its job is to pass laws with lovely sounding names that basically tell the president and the executive branch that he oversees to make this or that great. That is basically what our laws are. Make healthcare more affordable. Make housing cheaper. Reduce inflation by spending a bunch of money on stuff that has nothing to do with inflation. That is what our laws largely are. They defer to these agencies, who then actually have, weirdly, an entire structure of lawmaking called regulations, and even justice making through what's called administrative courts. This is the fourth branch of government, and it is not subject to any of the ideas that try to constrain the state that our founding fathers intended. It is the most tyrannical regime within the bowels of our government, and it is a fantastic thing that we are finally talking about this for real. If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.